Here we are, my Travel Ones podcast, and today my guest is Gabby Reece. How are you today, Gabby?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. As a retired professional athlete, an
Mhm.
entrepreneur, business owner, author, speaker, mom of three daughters. I'm the father of two daughters, so I can appreciate that. And then also being a wife, you got your plate pretty full.
Yeah, listen, I think we all have our plates full. And I
Yeah,
think, you know, what I always say is it's sort of like you're doing a lot of different things, but maybe you're not doing, everything full throttle at every moment.
right.
So I think it's learning which needs which attention when, and learning that dance has certainly been helpful.
You've had a lot of practice at it. You know, the
And,
many decades. Uh,
yeah.
hey, I'm older than you, so I don't mind. it's it's interesting to be able to use our wisdom now. You know, it's been a challenge growing up, and then now I feel like I don't mind being the old guy in the room.
Well, I'm a person who believes that when something is the way that it is, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go against that. And
Yeah,
time is what it is. And so I feel that embracing things that we are and then seeing everything about being in that phase of life, whatever it is. It's like when my friends are single, I'm like, listen, I'll tell you everything.
yeah,
Let's focus on everything that's great about being single. And then if that changes and you're in a relationship, then let's talk about all the ways that it's great that you're in a relationship. And I think whether you're starting out and in the world and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, let's talk about all the magic that is. And if you're, you've lived a minute and
yeah,
you're a certain age, then what's the power of that? And I find that generally is a better way to go through the days.
yeah, absolutely. You know, the volleyball players that I've talked to on the show are the most traveled athletes I know. I mean,
Oh,
out of football players, basketball players, jiu-jitsu athletes, fighters, volleyball players travel more than anybody I know. So did that get you kind of? I mean, you living on basically in two different states.
mhm.
Do you think the volleyball travels got you ready for that?
Yeah, well, and also when I was playing volleyball in college, I
Yeah,
started working in fashion. And so I was traveling quite a bit actually. So my coach would allow me not to go to spring training after my sophomore year, and I would live in New York and work. And I used to average 1 day a week in New York, and the rest of the time I was on an airplane,
that's crazy.
um, running around working in fashion. So I actually did as equally as much traveling, if not more, weirdly working as a model.
I was going to say, at a relatively young age, I know when you're going through it. I remember my college years. It was like I felt like this mature person, and now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, you're still young, And then I
Yeah.
look at my daughters are 26 and 28, and I'm like, oh, you're still young. And I'm like, oh, but hold on, I had you when I was 28. Okay,
Yeah. Well,
but you had to process modeling, volleyball, which is a full time job in college, especially at the D1 level, and then you had grades, you had other classes, and then
yeah.
a social life probably didn't exist too much, but
Yeah. I think I was, I understood the opportunity
hmm
in front of me. And by nature, I have a pretty organized mind. I don't, of course, have feelings of being overwhelmed,
yeah,
but I generally don't sort of get buried under heavy waves of being overwhelmed. And even when I was younger. So I would say that living an athletic lifestyle
yeah,
made a lot of that easier. So even when I was living in New York and doing all the sort of other job, I still actually really lived more as an athlete. So I
right.
would, go to bed early. I wasn't a particularly, I wasn't a big partier ever in those years. So I think all of that supported the ability to kind of juggle a few different things.
Did you create or do you have any travel habits or superstitions? Is there anything that you need to have before you go on the plane or?
No, I don't have any travel superstitions. I do have a rule because, like everyone, I've been on very bumpy flights
Yeah.
that I would not freak out about that because I said if God forbid anything was going to happen, I wasn't going to spend the last sort of few moments of my life flipping out.
Yeah.
So I have been and less, you learn how to travel. How do you take really only what you need?
Yeah.
So I think I got very good at like, well, these pants will work 4 different times as well as
Yeah.
that jacket and this shirt. Um, and when I was traveling though for volleyball, I would have a tendency to be a little more on it with like if I was going to bring snacks, if you will,
Yeah.
because especially if you didn't know what you were going to be getting into, you wanted to make sure to have at least a backup. And I used to talk to the indoor USA team because they would travel to some pretty interesting countries.
Yeah.
They would, especially if they were in Asia and stuff, and they would bring canned goods with them. So I think it's sort of this combination of, hey, I can get it. What can I get there?
Yeah.
And well, I do, what do will I absolutely need? And then when I had children, I always also was really serious about taking less stuff.
Yeah. Because you had to.
Well, and but not only that, sometimes it gets overkill. Like
Yeah.
especially when you have little kids, it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have a car seat and a stroller, and now I have all this stuff with me, and it makes traveling more difficult. And so for me, one of the ways because I wanted to travel with my kids was to take less stuff.
It makes it a lot easier. My wife still, she doesn't travel quite as much as me, so she still tends to pack extras, and I tend to pack exactly what I know I'm going to need for that trip. So
Yes, no offense to you being a male, but
none taken.
women usually will also anticipate. I mean, it's different when you're not traveling with your kids,
Yeah.
but it's like, well, we might need that or this. I think for me traveling though, um, I just came actually, I had a friend who just got married in Mexico
Yeah.
2 days ago. And I grew up in the Virgin Islands. And so I understand like small town living or things not being really efficient sometimes.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, and I was telling my husband this, is when we're outside of Puerto Vallarta, and it's like things run how they run,
Yeah.
right? It's like, and I said, it's interesting when you see people who live in these places, in a way, they're more patient
Yep.
because things don't run like a clock. And I was reminded that traveling, I think, is good for so many reasons, but one of them being where you sometimes get this attitude of you can go with the flow a little more
Yep.
because especially if you go to a place that's you're a welcome visitor, it's like, hey, this is how they do it there. Don't, you're not going to bring your New York attitude to wherever
Yeah.
and say like, hey, it's got to be like this. And so I think that was something also that felt really important about travel, which was to get outside of ourselves and how we grow accustomed to everything being such and having that patience, which also creates, I think, a humility.
Yeah.
Weird, where you just sort of go, okay, this is how it's going to go. The bus is going to come when it comes.
Yep.
It's just sort of how it is. So I think for me, doing that really early in life, and also growing up like that, like I said, in the Virgin Islands, um, I don't know, it creates a different, uh, not expectation, but not everywhere you go are you sort of chomping at the bit and like, well, it should be like this. It's like, well,
I get
no.
that even in the middle part of the country. Like, and I'd go to the Dakotas for work and all that. It's like people actually wave to you when you drive by, and you're like, here in Los Angeles, it's a different kind of wave. It's a middle finger wave.
Yeah.
But people are like super friendly, and it's just kind of the same thing. It's that it makes you think, okay, not all
Yeah.
people are bad and in a hurry.
Well, and you have to be that, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing is that I have my own versions of it where I catch myself when I'm sometimes in a place where I have a lot going on or you're in Los Angeles, instead of like, oh no, don't add to that too.
Yeah.
Bring bring something else.
Well, Hawaii's kind of like that, and there are some they say they're going to open at 10, but 11 ends up being
Yeah. And
You know,
I think there's something really valuable in life when you learn to go with have a little bit of that grace and just be
yeah.
like, it's okay,
I,
you know.
I definitely was not that way in my 30s, but I'm definitely in my 50s, and it's working out a lot better for me. Keep my
Yeah.
blood pressure down.
Well, and then you don't attract it, right? I
Yeah,
think you are have a level of acceptance of things. I feel like you go into more of a flow versus if you're constantly pushing and grinding, you're going to meet every single resistance that there is.
yeah.
And I find that there's so seldom the situations that really warrant that.
And I think travel does that. I wish more people would be able to travel because
Yeah.
even if, like I said, even if it's not, it doesn't have to be to Japan. It doesn't have to be across the world. Just a different state
Yeah.
can give you a different perspective on things. So
Yeah.
I think that's the value of travel. What are your top three places that you've visited so far?
Oh, geez. See, and this is the thing that was hard because again, I grew up in a really nice.
Yeah,
Well, okay. I mean, I live part-time on Kauai, and
yeah,
I will say that I find Kauai to be I mean, the state of Hawaii is very magical for me. That island in particular. Um, I say that God has offices everywhere, and that he definitely keeps one on Kauai for sure.
well, I can dispute that.
Oh, really?
I've been to Kauai once,
Okay.
and it was during
Oh, wow. That's,
the rainiest it had ever been in recorded history. They were rescuing people off the roofs.
yeah, I know my husband, we
It's
were
like
there.
3 years ago.
Yeah, it's called a rain bomb.
It
Um,
was unreal.
Well, we actually have a place on the river there, and Laird was pulling people with jet
Yeah,
skis off the valley, off
it was
their
crazy.
the taro farmers. But that doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
not a magical
No, I
place.
know, no, it's awesome. I've
No,
been
it,
to all the other islands, but
no, Kauai's no joke. It's not
yeah,
like for the faint-hearted.
yeah,
I've been to the Seychelles, which I thought was sort of interesting.
okay,
It's far.
yeah.
It's an interesting sort of diverse and interesting, different type of culture. Um, and let me think, where else? That I really, I mean, I remember the first time I went to Costa Rica, when I left there, I felt a little sad,
Yeah.
which that was an indication that I had a really interesting experience. I mean, a lot of people be like, what about mountains? Um, I like mountains, but I'm not
Yeah.
much of a mountain. I seem to be an ocean person.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Living
Uh,
on Kauai and in Malibu and being
yeah.
married to Laird. That's a
Yeah.
win.
I mean, I think that's all connected, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Seychelles was very interesting. Kauai, I find very beautiful. Um, and yeah.
What places have you not been to that you want to go to?
Oh, actually, I should also say that I really enjoyed New Zealand. I don't know why I forgot
Okay.
that. Sorry. I would like to go to Russia. Larry's been to Russia. He's been snowboarding in Russia, and I haven't spent any time in China.
There you go.
So I just think it's you always hear. I've always learned that when you hear about places, yes, there's always a truth about what you're hearing, but there's something about going and
Yeah.
also experiencing people yourself that I think is
Well,
important.
I also think, the way you interact with people might be different than the way I interact with people. So obviously my experience will be different than your experience.
Right.
So I mean, I always take that with a grain of salt. My bosses go to China several times a year for work. That's where we source a lot of our goods, and they have nothing but good things to say about it. And they go for weeks at a time. It's not like they're just going for the tourist stuff. They're going for work. But
Right.
they,
And that feels important because I feel like it's like that humanity element
hmm
that I don't want to be too victimized by, okay, this is good, that's bad, they're this, and
yeah.
just go there and be like, oh yes, we are humans everywhere, and also celebrating what is different about each other.
My daughter had a layover in Moscow, and she said the people that she met there were super nice too. So
Oh,
I haven't heard too many. I mean, like I said, it could be negative if it needs to be, but
well, that's it.
you know,
Yeah.
negative can be anywhere. How have you how have you balanced the work of multiple companies, speaking, to hosting, your husband being super busy. I know with the kids. How did you balance all that? And then obviously having two different states of residencies.
Well, it's all how you look at it also. So for me, I think I looked at everything as an opportunity versus sometimes I would slide into a mindset of like, oh, I have to get this done. And I felt like that was not a good place to work from and be organized from
Right.
versus these are all really great opportunities, whether it's having a family or having a business, having a full calendar, these are opportunities. And
Yeah.
so automatically taking as much stress away from these sort of commitments as I could, because I think the stress actually is more exhausting than the things that are on the calendar. It's
Yeah.
the tone. I have a tendency to be a lean in kind of person. And I realized that was good, but in some ways it was a real waste of energy. So I
Sure.
think for me, being I'm well organized. I still actually write everything down. You'll have people who put everything on their phones. I have to actually see it. And the reason I say that is because let's say, for example, there's a top load of work and I can sort of see what's getting, is going to need more time and energy.
Yeah.
So for example, if I'm doing Larry's schedule and he's traveling and doing a ton of work, then the family or his own personal time, where do I make sure that there's enough of that? Same for the girls. I mean, obviously they're bigger now. They're sort of handling their own schedules
Yeah.
more. Um, and perfection. That was the other thing is I never approached everything and said, okay, the goal is all this has to be done perfectly.
Right.
So I think being organized and staying calm. Uh,
And I like the fact that you write things out. I do too. And my daughters just call me old school. Like, why don't you just put it on your phone? I'm like, well, I'm the same way. I mean, I like seeing things.
yeah,
I'm like, okay, I didn't get that done. I got to get that. Let me move that over here. I'm the
yeah.
same way that
And
way.
it just I feel like I can organize the month because I have the whole picture of what the month is going to look like, so I know how it's going to impact the individual person in the schedule, but also them connected to the family and such. And
Yeah.
so it just gives me a better opportunity to do that well. And one of the tricks I've learned too is I've said this before is like, let's say I have an especially very busy day or week, is that I would look at the week in a horizontal uh, sort of a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was familiarized with everything that was going to be try to be accomplished or needed to get done, and then spin it. So I was only looking at one thing at a time. And one thing was coming at me at a
Oh, I get
time.
it. Yeah.
Because I feel like at times when we look at everything horizontally, we get overwhelmed, but we're not even there yet. And
Yeah.
so I would say, okay, I have a snapshot. I have a sense of things, so I'm not going to be caught off guard, or I'm pretty well planned, and then spin it and just take one thing at a time, because I can only be on a work call and then
Right.
go pick up a kid at school. I'm not doing them at the same time. So why am I using the bandwidth of responding to both when I'm doing one?
Yeah. Totally agree.
And so that was a way that made navigating sort of a lot of different things at one time, and reminding myself that I chose it. That was the other thing, is this wasn't happening to me. These were things that I was choosing. I chose to have a family. I chose to be in these businesses. I chose to say yes to these interviews, or whatever the thing I was
Yeah.
choosing. And really taking ownership of that. And so that really always helped me be empowered by, oh, look, this is what you've chosen.
Yeah. Do you think, I don't know that I think millennials get a bad rap because
Mhm.
we were screw ups when we were kids too. And I
Mhm.
think we just forgot a lot of the bad stuff. But do you, do you see younger people taking the responsibilities that you're talking about right there?
I think what's hard for the younger adults
Yeah.
is, at least when even we were working and very busy, we still had pockets of time that we weren't constantly accessible.
Plugged in. Yeah.
And the problem for them is even if, let's say, they start having these feelings of being overwhelmed, I understand it, because it's that they're always connected to something. They always have to respond to something. And we didn't have to navigate that. And I think what it does to your psyche
I agree.
and the veil, the thickness, like I feel like you need that time to recover, and that you sort of learn how to metal up. And I feel like they never get a moment to develop that sort of quiet or homeostasis that then they can go back in.
Yeah.
And so I feel for them, because they'd have to consciously create an environment around them and tell their friends, and coworkers and such, hey, listen, so after 6 o'clock,
I'm
I
done.
won't be responding. And I don't know that they have that vernacular, and I don't know that, especially in their workplace, if that it's even allowed. But it would, for me, I think that that's where we had a lot more grace than these guys have, for sure.
Yeah, I always told my daughters especially when they got in high school, the biggest punishment I could give to them was taking their phones away from them.
Oh
And I'm
yeah.
like, when I was in high school, I would never have wanted a phone. Like, yeah, I could have talked to my friends, but then my parents could always know where I'm at. And I knew, like, I'd get in trouble. I'd take off
Yeah.
and I'd be gone for 2, 3 hours. And I go, man, I'm going to get in trouble when I get home, but let me have
Yeah.
my moment here.
This
I get
time.
get home, I get grounded, get yelled at, whatever.
Well, and I think too, not to have boredom, which is important
Yeah,
for your imagination and your creativity. I think to not have as much time in your own mind to know how you think and feel, to be constantly blitzed by what other people are doing, what they're eating, where they're traveling, what they're wearing. I think, I don't know that we're
yeah,
not really geared for it. Just because we do it doesn't mean we're actually set up for it. And I think it's really tough on them. And like, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she's a good kid, and I'll be like, okay, well, where are you? I'll call her,
yeah,
let's say. And I don't call too much. So I just call if I need to, or if I have a feeling, whatever. And sometimes I'll FaceTime. Like, I'm like, if I do call you,
yeah,
then I want to see, right? But sometimes if I get a weird feeling or something, and she'll go, well, I can put my location on or something like that. And I'm like, no, I'm
well,
not tracking you. If you want to tell me the truth, you're going to tell me the truth. If you're going to lie to me, you're lying to me.
yeah,
I'm not going to track you on your phone. If you're traveling by yourself in some weird country and you want to do that so that someone always knows where you are, okay. But the whole thing is like, how do I raise you? You're managing yourself.
yeah.
I'm not here to be up your colon. Um, and it's hard, because I see a lot of young people where it's like somebody constantly knows where they are. And if it's not their parents, by the way,
Something else.
it's their friends. I
Yeah,
mean, look at Snapchat. They have all their little their little character, and they're in their car, and she'll be like, oh, she's coming down the street, or they're with those friends over there. And I'm like, why do you guys know this? Why
yeah.
wouldn't you turn it off? And she goes, it's weird if you turn it off. They think you're hiding something.
And maybe you should be. you know,
And you
Uh,
have the right to why don't you have the right to disappear and just
yeah.
do your own thing?
See, it's cultural. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I love the childhood I had, so
Oh yeah.
I would not want a phone tagging
Well,
me everywhere.
but we're also talking about, and all the science points to the addictive part of it.
Yeah,
So, we're dealing with a
the
sort of
dopamine and yeah.
another layer. So,
This brings up you start. How long have you had your podcast now?
I guess about a little bit over maybe 2 years now. I had a podcast with Neil Strauss first,
All right.
called The Truth Barrel. Then I took a hiatus myself, and then I decided to do it by myself. So probably for like the last 2 years.
What have you've had some incredible guests. Like the most recent is Tony Robbins,
Yeah.
and I'm a big fan of Tony, so it was great listening to it. What have you learned from podcasting? I mean, you're talking to a wide range of health and fitness guests.
Yeah.
You're sharing it, but you got to be gleaming some of the information for yourself.
Oh, for sure. The thing for me is, even in the early 90s, I used to interview other athletes. I did TV shows,
Hosting, yeah,
MTV Sports, and other things. And I always actually really enjoyed interviewing other people. One, to your point, there was always something to learn.
yeah,
And there's something really important, I think, when you have a job that's at all public. So I've had a job off and on for 30 something years, right? That's public. And there's something really powerful about making it completely about somebody else,
Yeah.
and figuring out what's the best way to showcase them. And um, also, how do you take maybe some information that is complicated or high end in a space I'm certainly interested in, which is self-care, or whatever we want to call it, health and wellness, and make it accessible to somebody, and just amplify those messages, because I'm not really interested in um, I think everyone's different, and they
Sure.
all have, and I'm not the best BS person, or like small talk or yuck it up. And so I do really like health and wellness. I like to talk about relationships. I like to talk about how, hard some of it is,
Yeah.
but how achievable, or encourage people also to find their way. That's the thing for me too, that's so important, is like, I figured out ways that I do it, and I'm still changing that. And my hope is to keep bringing information to encourage people to figure out how they do it,
Yeah.
because that's what we're responsible for. So I really like it. I have to read a lot of books, and you know and try to figure out, like, okay, what's going to be the angle on this conversation, but also not try to control it, try to listen and see where they want to go. So I like it, because it's also, each time before I do it, I go, well, I hope I can do a good job. And so I
Yeah.
think putting myself in a situation where you go, okay, I hope I can really show up and do a good job. I think that's healthy, because it's a little uncomfortable.
I was going to ask you because you've been an interviewee for 30 years, and being an interviewer,
Mm-hmm.
where you're supposed to ask the question and then let them talk. My wife, because I'm a salesperson, my wife's like, you got to talk less. The first, I'm on my almost 200th episode, but the first, I don't know, 50, my wife's like, you need to talk less. I'm like, what? I'm having a conversation. She goes, no, no, no. So, do you find you're like Tony? You asked a question and then you let Tony expand, which I thought was great. Is that conscious? Are you making conscious efforts?
Well, I try in my real life to be a good listener.
Yeah.
And yes, certainly it is conscious, but ultimately it's like I'm trying to let that person, it's about them.
Yeah.
A guy like Tony, it's better to, you can barely redirect. You just sort of like,
Let him
keep
go.
it organized, and then he's off to the races. Other people, you sort of have to maybe help them along.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly. And I have had it both ways, where I've had people say, well, I would like to hear your perspective more in your podcast. And so that it's like I'm trying to couple that with, like, if I can add value from
Yeah.
my experience, I will. But if not, I just try to really make it about the guest.
And that's key, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's an interesting part where you go, maybe if I could get someone to tune in, because they will tune in for me regardless of who I have on. So whether the person's really well known or not, because by the way, some of the best interviews are people who they do really interesting or important work, but they may not be super well known.
Right.
So the hope is, how do you have people trust you enough that they'll tune in for you regardless of the guest, and hopefully get value out of that. But listen, it's a dance for sure.
Well, like you're very good at self branding, and you've been doing it since you were a teenager, basically being a model. I mean, how do you separate the Gabby Reece, which is the person that you're going to be when we hang up, versus the public persona, and because it's a brand, and you've built that up.
They're pretty close.
Yeah.
They're pretty close. I've always tried to keep them pretty close, even when I was young. I don't know why. I think it's how I grew up in the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
That I wasn't raised with this idea of having to do presentation. So, for example, I had kind of a wild family. So no one was like, "Oh, don't worry, the neighbors. What are the neighbors going to think?" I wasn't.
You were those neighbors.
No, we were like, everyone was kind of wild, and so
Yeah.
I think in a way I didn't have that put on me, that stigma early about, how things appear.
Okay.
And so there's that. And then certainly when I was at Florida State and playing volleyball and doing interviews, I was I definitely was conscious about being a good communicator. Like, be clear in the way you speak and in your thoughts and try to connect those. But I never was trying to sell a perfect bill of goods. Like, I'm perfect. I have anything figured out. I never, I mean, look at how I'm sitting here right now, how I'm dressed. Like, I've never been a person who
Yeah.
was trying to sell that fantasy, because I couldn't sustain that or live in that. And so really it was more about trying to be as honest as I could, but you don't want to be like gratuitous, right? So you have a real life. I have my daughters.
Yeah.
I have to protect their privacy a bit. My husband, but even within that, it's like, hey, the challenge would be then, could you get your everyday life, could you be lining it up so that it wouldn't be something you had to hide or BS about?
Right.
And so I think I want to depict the messiness of that is my life. However, I don't have really a ton of interesting secrets. I'm just not. So I think I've always tried to have those line up. I wouldn't be so different if you came to my house. You wouldn't be like, oh God,
Right.
like she was like, oh, like over there, you know. And I live with a person like that. Laird is an incredibly honest person. Um, and kind of what you see is what you get, even in the public way. So it's just been that way a long time.
Laird is overly similar to my brother-in-law.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? Like I've known my brother-in-law for 41 years, almost 40 years now.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's lived in San Clemente, Huntington Beach, and Santa Barbara.
Okay.
Never away from the ocean.
Yeah.
And fireman. He just retired, so he was a battalion chief at Glendale Fire. But yeah, just he's the one that taught me how to surf. So
Uh-huh.
it was
Yeah. I mean, Laird needs to be near the ocean,
yeah, that's Ed.
but Laird does a lot. I mean, Laird does a lot of different things. He took a very different path. So in order to do that, he does a lot of traveling, or,
Yeah, I was
things
gonna
in,
say, do you guys
in
sit down and look at your schedules and say, Larry goes, hey, I'm going to be gone for this week. I'm going here. You're like, I'm going here. Who's
um,
who's going to watch the kids?
yeah, no, well, I'm the keeper of the schedule, so
Okay.
I know how to line it up. And Laird also has a clauses in his appearances or jobs. Like, if it's winter, if it's sort of
Yeah.
November through February, there's
Minimal.
there's a 20-foot clause where if it's like, hey, if the surf's big, Laird has 5 days to let you know
Yeah.
before the commitment. If you want to book him or do that, you can. But if a 20-foot swell is coming somewhere,
Yeah.
then that is Laird's priority at that time. So we're
That's
and
pretty awesome.
well, yeah, I mean, because that doesn't happen. People think it happens like, oh, you just go
Oh
ride big
no.
waves. It's like, well, big waves, certain seasons, like this year's a La Nina. So the low pressures, there isn't they're not organized, and they're getting shot off into all these directions. So they don't have a ton of swells. And
Right.
so I've been with Laird for over 26 years. So we figured it out, and our family is a priority. So that's never like a thing.
Has he ever had a 20-foot swell call when there's something that you really wanted him to be at, or is it just like something
Oh yeah, for sure. But I don't fight that. I'll tell you a story. One time they did this movie called Riding Giants, and Riding Giants was selected to open Sundance, and Robert Redford was introducing the film.
Right.
And I was there with our now 18-year-old who was 3 months old. I flew to Utah from Maui, and Laird didn't come for like a day after because the surf was going to Piahi to Jaws. And so he was not there. And I was like, that is what the movie is about. So about people who have this quest
Yeah.
and they're going. And I really appreciate that about Laird. I appreciate that it's a real thing and it's important to him. And he wouldn't sacrifice someone from his situation with the girls, let's say,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's what makes him him. And I would never want him to not be that person, you know?
Do you think the amount that you guys both travel has made you stronger, or I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it's at least in my relationship, it's created some friction because you're sitting there going, well, I have to go to this.
Oh, no, no, because one thing is that I learned this from Laird. He's very good at this. When he is at home, which is often,
So
he's very present.
yeah,
And so I think what people don't do, the friction could be, um, uh, that when you're at home, if the other person is feeling like you're still not really there, then when you leave, it's like, well, wait a second, I didn't connect with you.
right.
I think if we learned, and again, Laird has taught me this, he's very present when he's there. And I'm like, yeah, great. And listen, I have my own things I want to do. And I think it's important for people to know too, like if someone's frustrated that you're traveling or whatever, it also is another way of saying, hey, I I miss you also.
Yeah,
And so the one of the things we do is if he's gone and it's a longer trip, a lot of times we won't over talk on the phone because it's just more opportunity to get on each other's nerves, or you miss the person or he's missing the family. And so we, at times, if the time zones are really weird or it's
yeah,
long, it'll be like, hey, you'll be home in a few days. Like, I love you, you know, because sometimes those phone calls are not necessarily enhancing the situation. I try not to, like, if he's away and something's going on with the family, I don't, when he calls, go, oh, and then this happened and that happened. Because
yeah.
I'm like, the
Who
poor
wants to
guy's
hear
just
that?
trying to call in and there's nothing he can do. And I'm just going to sit on the phone and complain. That's dumb. Um, Conversely, if I'm away and something goes down with one of the girls, he's like, oh, let me tell you what your daughter did.
Yeah, your daughter. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so I think you learn, like you learn the rhythm, and I want to make it a positive thing for my partner.
Sure.
But the key has been though that when he is at home, he is very present. So I think that is probably a good idea.
Absolutely. Probably the best tip I've gotten from Don Wildman, who's a TV show host on the History Channel and all that,
Uh-huh.
travels around the world for a show. When he leaves, he writes a handwritten love letter to his wife
Yeah.
and mails it from the airport that he's leaving. So she gets it the next day. And it's not a text, it's not an email, it's a handwritten letter.
Yeah.
That's pretty key.
Yeah, you're thought of, you're important, you're
Yeah.
considered. And I think also people who are the other person, like his wife knows, like, part of the reason I'm attracted to this person and I'm interested in them is because of this. So we can't turn against the things that also make people who they are.
Yeah.
In fact, we should celebrate in them as well so that the person feels, I think when we have partners that feel supportive and like they see us and they get us on some level, it only enhances the
Makes it
relationship,
a lot better.
and and as long as people can understand, sometimes, especially if you have small children, I feel like a partner at home more often feels like they're getting left behind.
Yeah.
And so as long as the person who's traveling has can have some understanding about like maybe what they're experiencing, I think it makes it a smoother for sure.
Yeah. I used to take a lot of pictures for my daughters when I would go on the road and travel the states, and so I'd come home and share with them. Hey,
Yeah,
here's the museum I went to. Here's Louisville. Here's North Dakota. Here's or
yeah,
wherever.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That's all. It's just being sensitive to the other person's thing, and it makes it all, I think, a lot easier. But
work out.
travel, it's interesting though. I've traveled so much that there's a part of me that's like, uh, I don't
Yeah.
I don't need to go so many places sometimes.
I always tell my wife, I said, just give me one day to kind of if I've been on the road for 7 days or 10 days or 14 days or whatever,
Yeah,
I know, for her, she's waiting for me to come home so we can go out. And I'm like, just give me one day so I can just kind of center,
regroup.
be happy I'm at home, get my stuff put away, and then let's go out to, date nights and do all that again.
Well, because reentry is always a little weird.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, especially like if you're the female and you're home with the kids and you get a system and you're going, and then it's like someone comes back in and
And
it's like,
jumps in the middle.
like, take it easy. We have a system going on here. So I
Yeah.
think that transition is for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
sure. Oh yeah.
unfortunately, sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It's a bumpy. It's a bump. Sometimes reentry is bumpy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's once you have enough experience, you go, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This is that bumpy reentry. I'm considering you now. You're considering me like another person. You know.
Again, I wish I had that the wisdom in my 30s. In my 50s, I'm like, my kids think I'm cool. I was uncool for a while, and then I became cool again. So
What did I hear this uh a kid 14 years old, like the parents can't drive, they're stupid, their music sucks, all this stuff.
yeah,
And then the kid's 21 and all of a sudden it's like, oh, the music's pretty good. And it's like, I can't believe how much my parents learned in like 7 years. It's like, uh-huh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. They're so smart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all part of it.
appreciate it. Hey, thank you so much for the time. I don't want to eat up too much more of your time.
Yeah.
What's the best way for my listeners to follow you?
Oh, I have Instagram at Gabby Reece. I have the Gabby Reece show. And yeah, just usually.
Go to her website.
Oh yeah,
It's got everything on it.
there you go. It's all there. Yeah. And I think the only other thing I'll say about traveling that
Yeah.
I sometimes I do, I'm like a reluctant traveler at times, but I'm always reminded that that perspective outside of my everyday life, um, I just think it's so essential. It's like,
Yeah.
even if it's a day or whatever. I mean, I just went to this wedding in Mexico for like a day, and we couldn't get into our hotel, and then the guy finally brought the key, and then it was like it was in Sayulita, and it was like the staircase that went straight up for I don't know how long. There was like a pack mule, and when I was walking up the stairs, I was like, these are important. These
Yeah.
like out of your everyday grindy routine, all your, we all get these systems in place to make our lives as easy as possible. And just that reminder of like seeing a different culture, eating a different food, going to a different place, getting out of your own life, the richness and the perspective that it gives you is such an important gift.
Even getting outside of I always tell people like Puerto Vallarta is beautiful, but get outside of Puerto Vallarta. Go to Nayarit, go north. Go through a checkpoint where they're holding AK-47s just to go to a different county.
Yeah, it gets your attention, and I just think those perspectives like give you different appreciations and
Yeah.
different skills, different tools, like how to communicate with people, how to learn, get somewhere or whatever. So I really do appreciate the theme of the importance of that, and knowing again for yourself.
Yeah.
We can't have people communicate to us about the world around us only. We need to
Experience.
go see someone and interact with them, and again that just that humanity, and take a look around.
I always find. Yeah, I was going to ask you one last question. That just came to me
Okay.
because you've traveled so much and
Mhm.
you've had to rely on the people that live there to help you out, whether it's restaurant, hotel, whatever. For me, I live in Redondo Beach. I mean, like, I live in a tourist space.
Mhm.
I always find myself being overly friendly or overly helpful to people I know are lost.
Totally.
Like when, first skating on the strand or whatever, or
Totally.
a restaurant, I'm like, you guys lost? What do you need help? You know?
Yeah, I do that, and especially like on Kauai, I'll see people and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, no idea. Um, yeah, because listen, when I was 18 or 19, I remember one time I flew to Luxor, Egypt by myself. This is prior to cell phones, to do a shoot,
Yeah.
British Vogue, and the fog was too thick to land in Cairo, so we had to sleep in Amman, Jordan. So I'm 18 or 19. I'm flying by myself, 6'3", long blonde hair, no cell phones, and it's only the kindness of strangers that
Yeah.
you're making it. And so I think it's really important to take that opportunity when you see someone, and also you're making their experience wherever you are better by
Sure.
just taking 2 minutes and helping them out.
That's, I think traveling has helped me with that though,
Yeah.
because I want to be that person for the person that helped me out.
Yep. We did take in one stranger too in Kauai, an
Oh, wow.
Italian. We did take an Italian kid in. His mom sent me a bunch of olive oil, but he was a good guy,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's like I said to Laird, "Are you comfortable?" And he said, "You know how many people when I went to Europe and he was windsurfing and surfing, he goes took me in and helped me, or
Yeah.
gave me food, like a local meal." It's like, and that's
That's
the
huge.
stuff. That's the big stuff. That's the good stuff, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's, I always tell people I went to, have you ever had Cajun food?
Yeah.
So I go to Louisiana for the first time, and I went to this small little restaurant, and and she goes, "Oh, it's your first time?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, she brought out a little of everything,
Yeah.
and I was like, I mean, a lot of everything. And then she goes, "Well, what do you want?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm full," you know. So I ordered some. I ate a little bit of it. I couldn't finish it, and then she was like, do you want a dessert?" And I go, "No, I didn't even finish my dinner."
Yeah.
She goes, "Well, we could put it in a blender, and you could drink it on the way back." Because I was in Port Arthur, Texas for work.
Oh
And I'm
yeah.
like, "No, I'm okay. I don't need the 5,000 calories, whatever I've had already." You
For
know?
real. And that's the thing, people don't realize those. I like that about Hawaii too. They call it the aloha spirit.
Yeah,
Like, oh what, come eat, I'll feed you. Oh my cousin got that fish or killed that pig and then
yeah,
they cooked it, and that's the best.
it is.
Yeah,
So again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
of course.
And
Easy.
maybe I'll see you at a volleyball tournament this summer. Now that the AVP is going to have guests.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So,
That's right.
do you ever go to the tournaments anymore?
I haven't gone to a tournament in a while.
No. I
Yeah.
just ride my bike to them. Tends to
Yeah, I
work
was
out.
gonna say you're right there.
Yeah.
You should go.
Yeah, better, right?
Uh,
Thanks, Gabby. Talk to you
well,
soon.
bye.
Bye bye.